Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us in our NetSuite session. Take control over your projects with NetSuite Services Resource Planning, SRP, another acronym for you. Let's kind of jump into this session. So we are going to, well, first let's start off with a little bit about your presenter. My name is Paul Clayton. I've been with FMT for quite a while. I'm a senior practice director here and have worked with multiple ERP solutions, really those solutions being NetSuite, Dynamics GP, and SAP Business by Design. Exposed to lots of different projects over my period and lots of different business processes as well. So I've seen quite a few different things and has helped us as a group at FMT here to develop some best practices around those business processes. Things I like to do. I like to go to the beach here in good old sunny San Diego, and I like to bike ride and play softball. So those are things that give me enjoyment. So moving on, what are we planning on accomplishing today? Well, I'd like to show you who are on this session a new way of being able to manage your projects, leveraging the NetSuite application, how you can plan resources and skill sets effectively through some of the capacity resource planning components of NetSuite, and really doing it kind of anytime, anywhere on any device, given the mobility of a purely cloud-based solution, all on a unified platform. So not having to log in and out of different applications to be able to do different things within the solution. NetSuite is a fully unified business platform. So let's talk about some of the targeted segments where we see NetSuite SRP being used. Obviously, it's primarily in the services industry where you have software companies, consulting companies, professional services, law firms. So some of those that you see listed on your screen there are really the different types of companies that work well from a NetSuite advanced projects or project management perspective. Some of the system challenges that we see out there today, lots of manual processes and non-integrated systems. So again, as I mentioned before, doing things in one system then having to log into another, or maybe leveraging spreadsheets or external applications to go about your business process. Legacy systems kind of lack flexibility, so kind of the older on-prem, some of the older on-prem type solutions, we run into issues where you've configured the solution, but as the business model changes a little bit or new things get introduced, new deals, new sales, new customers get introduced into the business, and as the business evolves over time, it's a bit harder to configure the solution to be able to address those business models. Lack of visibility into data. ERP applications in general, I think, are getting a little bit better at that, but in terms of real-time visibility, NetSuite is kind of at the top of the chart relative to the KPIs and the scorecards and some of the ad hoc reporting capabilities that it has. And also embracing and involving technologies within the cloud. So you'd be surprised how many applications today just don't have that ability to, or that responsive design type function to where I can either load an app on my iPhone or my Android, or I can utilize the application on a tablet computer without having to worry about resizing my browser so much. And then also because these businesses are working on those first 4 items that we just reviewed, sometimes they have trouble actually working on the business and developing the business itself because they're so involved and so embedded in just trying to work with a system that requires too much of their time. So how does that break down? It kind of breaks down on kind of from a financial perspective as well as a services or an operations perspective. So the financial side of the house is struggling with customer billing and changing business models like we talked about, managing businesses that are not only domestic in their location but global, and making sure the consolidation works well. And then on the services side, really from a delivery perspective, being able to execute on their projects and do it from a satisfactory perspective relative to their clients, managing their resources and getting the billing correct. These are all, again, challenges that we see companies having with today's systems. So that's well represented in this slide, where over to the left I got several spreadsheets that are being used to track opportunities, or maybe they're external systems that are being used to track opportunities, to manage projects, spreadsheets to manage resources, different applications to manage your time, and others to manage your expenses, all kind of through some kind of upload or connector being fed into another ERP solution. And then over to the right there, performing all of your different reconciliation functions and your billing functions, and maybe maintaining revenue recognition schedules, kind of all outside of the system. It's all disconnected. You don't get the audit trail that you really need to have for those types of processes when you have the fragmented solution. So we all know there's a better way to do this, and that better way is NetSuite SRP. It's what we're here to talk about, Services Resource Planning. So with NetSuite Services Resource Planning, NetSuite SRP, we get financials, we get professional services automation, and we get kind of that CRM functionality all in one solution. So really bringing it all together. So that deals with the issues and challenges that we're facing from a financial perspective that companies have relative to global consolidation, revenue recognition issues that seem to just be getting more and more complex based on RevRec regulations. Being able to operate in a multi-subsidiary, a multi-company, a multi-currency type environment, really being able to do that efficiently and effectively under one platform. And then being able to make sure we're accurate and efficient relative to the clients that we're billing for the services that are being provided. On the delivery side of the house, with one solution from a NetSuite perspective, we get real-time resource visibility through the capacity resourcing planning component. We get consolidated time tracking, rules-based automated billing, which I think is a great feature of NetSuite in terms of being able to configure a rule that contains a condition, and once that condition is met, there are engines that run in the background that look for those conditions and automatically generate an invoice for you, or automatically propose an invoice for you, and that it can be reviewed and then sent to the client. And then KPIs, scorecards, and kind of real-time data being presented at the project managers on their dashboard or at their fingertips, so they can make good decisions relative to what resources they're going to utilize on a project, or maybe what suppliers they're going to engage into a particular project, that type of thing. So as mentioned a little bit before, with NetSuite, we get kind of seamless integration of projects, project management, and the business process. So whether we're talking about processing vendor bills, expenses, expense reports, timesheets, that type of thing, all of those processes that are involve those transactions will update your project budgets real time as they're passed through the system. So again, that you have the project manager gets a very good feel for where the project stands in terms of its health. NetSuite also has this concept called centers. Really what that boils down to is centers that are available for customers and suppliers and employees to log into. From a customer and a vendor perspective, those centers are pretty straightforward. A customer can actually log into its customer center and process a payment on an invoice or check their specific balance. Perhaps they may want to, or they may need to, log on to their customer center page and download some kind of specification or some sort of user guide or a manual. And that kind of thing can be done using the customer center. Vendor center, same kind of thing, except on the supplier side. So suppliers can dial in, or business partners can dial into that center and interact with the business in that way. The employee center is another method by which your project resources that may be W-2 employees of the company, or they may be independent contractors, can actually log into the employee center, and that's really a dialed-down version of NetSuite, where they can process a timesheet, process an expense report, or run a particular report relative to what they're doing, or again, be able to interact with the business in sort of a limited way, yet an efficient way. So we'll also take a look at NetSuite from a resource capacity and allocation perspective, the tool that can be used for that. So a project manager has a better chance of ensuring that the right resource is assigned to the right task, that their skill sets are appropriate for the task, and that their availability is such that they won't be overbooked and unavailable at a time that's critical for a specific project. So we can take a look at that tool and sort of see how that helps us make sure we're assigning the right resource to the right task. There's strong billing features, project billing features within NetSuite, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, for all types of service delivery models. And what that means, I mean, from my bullet point there, it handles complex billing scenarios, whether those billing scenarios are subscription billing related, recurring billing related, or really rules-based. We get a lot of flexibility there relative to how you may want to bill your client through a specific project. And that's key. That helps us get around the issue that we had earlier about a business being able to scale and be able to take on a different model and take on different types of clients and meet their needs relative to delivering project services and appropriately billing for them. And we get some project profitability snapshots within the solution as well. So we're capturing timesheet information, we're capturing, again, supplier information and revenue-related transactions within the project. NetSuite gives us the ability to generate project profitability reporting right out of the solution to ensure that we, again, know the health of our projects. So with all that, let's kind of take a look at the solution. We'll actually jump into NetSuite. So I'm going to do that if you bear with me for just 1 minute. So that should be coming up on your screen. NetSuite, the actual desktop or the home page of this particular individual. His name is Mark Collins, and Mark, as you can see up at the top right-hand corner, is going to be the project manager of our project. Mark has an administrator role, so Mark sees quite a bit of functionality within the solution because of his admin rights. But if we take a look at NetSuite, for those of you who haven't seen it, I'll spend just a little bit of time relative to navigation. Right across the top here, we have our drop-down and roll-right menus that are kind of broken up into the different series of transactions or types of transactions that you'll process within the application. Our lists, so accounting lists relative to chart of accounts and items, the unit of measure, employees, and relationships, our customers and vendors, and that type of thing. And we get some reports, well, a lot of reports that are broken up into different series as well. And over here I'll point out that we've got our support tab where we have Suite Answers, where Suite Answers is really online help that's available to any user within NetSuite. And it's a great resource relative to being able to find resolutions to issues within the Suite Answers knowledge base, and then to also see different training videos and best practices that NetSuite has published out to this site. NetSuite also has this kind of recent records functionality to where anything that you've recently done within the application, rather than having to navigate to it through a menu, you can come right to that record here within the recent records menu. And then you have some favorites and your home base as well. So we're on Mark's home page, and as I said earlier, where we've got a reminders portlet. So Mark has some timesheets to review and some expense reports to approve and some milestones to review relative to his projects. And then also some navigation portlet capability here, where he's got shortcuts listed to be able to quickly navigate through the application rather than running through the menus up top. And then we've got you could call this a save search. It's basically a custom list of information that you can publish out to your home page, where you can look at specific things relative to, in this case, it's the project entity. So Mark's projects that he has out there, various projects that he's managing, he's able to kind of get a quick view of where things stand from a percent complete perspective, as well as a budget to actual from an hours standpoint. And then, of course, you can drill into that record or edit that record and actually drill into the dashboard as well. So every project has a corresponding project dashboard that you can launch and view some more KPIs around the status of that project. So one of the things that I think I'd like to point out is creating a project within NetSuite is a pretty simple thing to do. We can leverage project templates, and that's really what we would want to do here. So if I go out to my project templates list, go ahead and let that refresh, we can see that we've set up several project templates that will help us quickly create a project. So in this particular instance, we're going to be reviewing and taking a look at a project that kind of represents sort of an equipment or a system installation, at a residence or a business or something along those lines. So we've already set up tasks related to that particular project, some lead and lag time, indicated what types of tasks those are, whether they're milestone tasks. We have a couple milestone tasks relative to contract signature and installation completion, that type of thing. So we can leverage this template to actually create a project within just a few minutes. When we do that, when we actually click on that Create Project button right there, it'll actually create a record, something similar to this project that's about ready to come up. So this is project number 1180, our E85 equipment installation project for the client Abbott. So we can see in terms of the primary information here, we've got Mark Collins, he's the project manager. We've got some comments here relative to the installation, special instructions, and the special instructions are attached. That's one other thing about NetSuite is, it has some document management capability relative to being able to attach documents to transactions or associate emails to different records or transactions, which kind of all keeps the story in the same spot. Right? So I've got this project, and over here I've got an attached file that's called special work order construction, special work order instructions that Mark and the project team can refer to as they are moving throughout the project. NetSuite does a very good job at maintaining audit trail code. So while I'm out here, I'm just going to jump over into the system notes, and we can see we have date time stamps, user stamps for changes that are made to the system or configuration that's set, old value and new value. So we get a very good feel for the audit trail and the changes that were made and who made those changes, what was the old and what were the new values within the solution. So great there in terms of being able to track your transactions and your records from an audit perspective. Okay, so the one thing I didn't mention in navigation is we have this global search window up here. Global search is great because I can enter anything, and in this case I'm going to enter an employee, if I can spell his name right, Mark Collins, and the solution will go out and it'll look for everything relative to the value that you're searching for. In this case, it's the employee Mark Collins. So I've got, if I was to click on Mark Collins, it would pull up a separate tab and it would show Mark here as one of our project resources. So our project resources that we're going to be working with today, we're in the system, we're talking to these guys, we might as well get familiar with their faces. So there's Mark. The other project resource that we're going to be working with is Abby Kwan. So there's a nice little picture of Abby. Larry Nelson's going to help us from a consulting perspective as well when we get to some of the project tasks. So there's Larry, and then we have Abigail Khan, who is another consultant with the company. So those are the really four of the project resources that we're going to be using. Those project resources are all set up as employee records within the solution, and we can track all of the records related to that specific employee from a timesheet perspective or from a transaction standpoint. Any resource allocations that we've performed for that specific resource can be recorded within the application as well. So a lot of good information in terms of what's sitting on the employee record that we have at our fingertips. Another thing is skills and expertise. So what is that particular project resource really good at? We can make sure that we're documenting from a skill set perspective what that resource is efficient in. So again, we get the right resource on the right task in our projects. All right, looks like a pretty stellar project team to me. So let's jump back into the project. From our template, we've established a few other things. Estimated work for the project, scheduled start date we actually defined once the project record was created, and then some of these other things like remaining work and baseline dates and calculated and overrided percent completes are really values that are defined as we start to interact with the project more in the system. Down here at the bottom we have our project tasks. All those tasks came from the template, so we didn't have to type any of that in. If we dive into one of the tasks, let's say we look at the equipment solution design task, I can go ahead and launch the detail of that task. And then we can see that we have resources assigned here. We've got predecessors that we can establish. So if we have tasks that have relationships like maybe this one, we can see that we've got relationship records here from task to task, communication relative to that task, files. So if we have a specific milestone that we've reached and we want to make sure we capture notes and emails relative to the acknowledgement of that completed milestone, we can certainly do that here within the task, and it stays with the project when it's in the system. So lots of detail relative to the different tasks that are available. One other thing I want to mention on the tasks, you can see here that the resources that are assigned are specific resources. They're the named resources that we talked about a little bit earlier for the project team. Those can be actually if we go back and we look at the template, those are actually generic resources. And what's nice about NetSuite is if we can assign generic resources within our template, once we create a project from that template, then we can replace those generic resources with specific resources. And NetSuite will sweep down through all of the tasks and will replace those resources with a specific resource wherever applicable. So if we do that, we can see here, I'm going to go ahead and click on the Resources tab. We've set allocations for a few resources here. We'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second. But over here on the resource list, again, if I hadn't already replaced the generic resources with specific resources, then you might see a generic resource name like project manager or consultant or installation specialist, that type of thing. So by coming over here and selecting the Reassign Tasks, and it's important to know that the Reassign Task function is only available to resources that have a project manager role within that project. You can come over here and select the Reassign Task icon, and then it pulls up the generic resource. In this case it says Mark Collins, but you'd have a generic resource here. We have that generic resource assigned to each one of these tasks within the project, and then we come down here, we can select our specific resource. So once we do that and process that request, then again all of the resource assignments will be updated for that specific for those tasks. So a very easy way to to be able to swap out, once you've made your allocation, to be able to swap out the specific generic and specific resources. So let's talk, I guess, back up one step real quick and talk a little bit about resource allocations, because that leverages the resource capacity planning tool within NetSuite. So if I jump over here to List Services, and I'm going to open it up in a separate tab, the resource allocation grid. Let's let that refresh. So it brings up some of the resources that we're talking about today. From here we get a look, and we can get a daily look, a weekly look, or a monthly look, and to kind of go out further in time, we'll need to scroll to the different periods, but we can get a monthly view of where things stand for that given resource. Highlight, if you come over here and put your cursor on top of one of those resource assignments, then we can get a little bit of detail relative to what that specific allocation is about. These allocation bars are interactive, so I can actually grab that and I can drag it out further if we want to extend that allocation. But from here we can also create a new resource allocation. So if I click on the new resource allocation button, I can come over here and I can say, well, I need to not only select a specific resource that I want to allocate to this project, but I need to dial down who it is that I'm going to be selecting so I make sure that I get the right resource on the right task. So if we dive into here, we can see that we've got kind of a search window. So the search window allows us for a given time period, so say 9/8 to 9/15, and for a given class as well. So if we wanted to classify our resources into kind of billing groups, I need somebody who's got a minimum of 1 year experience, who's at least 10% available, and get rid of that, and is knowledgeable in HTML5. Right? So we're going to throw that over there and we'll submit it. So by doing that, the system goes out and it looks at the resources and their applicability to the parameters that you just put into the search. And it'll return some resources that are available. So we can make this window larger and we kind of get a full picture of what's going on. So some really good ways to be able to really zero in on the specific resource that we need. If we find that resource, we can select it and just move on from there relative to what project we want to assign that resource to. Maybe it's our E85 project, start and end date of that allocation. We can define the allocation by number of hours or percentage. That's really a setup of this particular feature within NetSuite. And then we can hard or soft book that time. Hard booking actually will reduce the capacity or the availability of that resource, whereas the soft booking doesn't necessarily impact that availability as much as the hard booking does. And then we can select OK here. So by selecting OK, it'll propose that resource onto, or create that resource allocation record onto our grid here. So if everything looks good, you can drop that out to Excel for a little bit of analysis, print it out if you'd like, take it to PDF, and then save it off. And then we've got our allocated resources over on the project side. So that's really how those resource allocations from a project perspective, I'm back on the project page now, are built up against the project. Okay, so let's jump over into the budget. So I'm just kind of moving across the tabs here. So we can ask NetSuite to either calculate a cost budget based on information that we already have in the system, or we can actually put it in ourselves. So if I put this into edit mode, then I can come in here and I can define a total budget for labor-related expenses, vendor bills and expense reports, supplier-related transactions, others, which are basically traced back to general ledger entries. And then I get a total for my expenses, which can be spread across the multiple periods that the project will span. So you can see here everything is in September for this particular project. So we can see that from a cost perspective, and we can also see that from a billing standpoint. So we've asked NetSuite to calculate the values based on the billing budget or the billing rules that are already set up. So when we do that, NetSuite will go out and it'll take a look at the billing rules, the charge rules that we've set up, and I actually have two billing rules set up against 2 milestones within the project. One is a contract signature milestone, and then the second one is an installation complete milestone. So we're billing $10,000 on this particular installation at the point at which the contract has been completed, or the contract has been signed, and then we'll bill the additional $20,000 at the point at which the installation is complete. So we've combined all that together. We get a little bit of a P&L tab here. So estimated billing for that project is $30,000. Our cost is estimated at $6,500. with a gross margin and an estimated gross margin percent. And it kind of breaks that down in terms of as you start processing transactions down here below, it'll start categorizing those costs into labor, expense, supplier, and other related costs. We haven't done any billing yet against that, so we don't see anything from a revenue perspective. But as we process and get through, and as the project progresses, we'll see that kind of thing. Okay, over on my Related Transactions tab, this is nice because any transaction that we process, or any email that we process, any communication we have, you can see there's a couple messages here, email going back and forth. Any transactions, like I said, cost-based transactions, so vendor bills that we process against the project. There's a couple vendor bills right here. Expense reports, this is by line item in this particular view, but expense reports that are processed against the project. All of that shows up here, so we've encapsulated all of the cost-related transactions and provided them right at the fingertips of the project manager, so we can see directly in real time, as those transactions are approved, what is affecting the project budget. And then timesheets as well. So as we're processing timesheets for the particular project, then we can capture that time as either allocated time based on the allocations we made a little bit earlier, or actual time as the actual timesheet moves through its approval process. And once it is fully approved, then it posts to the project. Administration we already kind of talked about relative to just attachments and audit trail. So this is looking pretty good. We've built up our project and we're ready to really start processing transactions against the project now. As you can see already, I've sort of done that because the first 3 tasks here already have some calculated percent complete against them relative to timesheets that have been processed against that against the project. But to give you sort of a better feel for how a timesheet can be processed against the project, let's actually jump in as another user. So Abigail Kahn was one of the project resources for this particular project. So we're going to go ahead and log in as Abigail. Oops, I got the wrong Abigail. So let's try this one. There we go. So that'll take a second. Abigail has the access to, her access is to the Employee Center. So as we were talking about a little bit earlier, this is a basic Employee Center setup. From the Employee Center, we can, the 3 primary things that we can do are process a purchase request, process a timesheet, or process an expense report. So Abigail is going to enter her timesheet, so she clicks on the Enter Time link, and it brings up a view where, still log me in as Abby Kwan. Well, we're going to go with Abby Kwan. So Abby is going to process a timesheet, and as you can see, when we clicked on timesheet, it brings up the existing entries that have been processed for that particular time period. So we can kind of move between previous weeks and future weeks. We can also, as you can see, add time entries to an existing timesheet that's already been approved if we need to. So we'll go ahead with Abby's timesheet here, and I'm going to grab a project that she's assigned to, and then we'll get a task. So these are the tasks that are listed against that project that we were looking at earlier, that E85 installation. Right, so we got a little bit of review, a little bit more review that had to be done on the contract, and she did that on Thursday. So we'll log 1 hour of that time. This little icon over here is for billing notes. So we can capture specific information relative to what she did for that time, and if need be, we can pull those billing notes onto the customer invoice. So this was reviewed contract with client to obtain signature, right? And don't mind my typing skills. There we go. So we've now noted what we've done, and we can go ahead and add that entry to the timesheet and then go ahead and either save that timesheet or submit it. In this case, I'm just going to submit it because we're ready to have that timesheet approved. So the basic functionality out of NetSuite the timesheet review process in NetSuite is a bit in flux still, but there are certainly improvements and different functions being introduced to the timesheet workflow. But the basic timesheet approval workflow that I'm using today is really kind of what comes right out of the box. So if we see here in Abby's list, I've got my timesheet from starting on 9/4 that is currently in a pending approval state. Right? So we can very easily sign out and sign back in as her timesheet reviewer, which just happens to be Mark. And I don't think I typed that. Oh, I did type the password incorrectly. So here we are. So now Mark has timesheets to approve, and by clicking on in his reminder portal, his timesheets to approve, we see Abby's entry for an hour here. So Mark can drill into that entry if he wants to and look at the detail, read the notes, and then he can mark that particular time for approval, and he can reject it or he can approve it. So I'm going to go ahead and approve it. So we'll push it through, and then that timesheet, that labor cost is reflected against the project. We still have to go through one more step of ensuring that the timesheet actually gets posted, so there is a GL impact for that particular timesheet. So that I'm not going to show that step today, but it's a pretty simple step of going in and reviewing a list of timesheets that are prepared or proposed for posting to the GL, and once you do that, then we've got a GL impact for that project. So if I jump back over to the project homepage, over on my related transactions, that entry that we just did for time actually shows up for Abby right here as 1 hour. So that's how you process a timesheet. We can also I'd also like to take a quick look at an expense report transaction. So let's see if the system will allow us to log in as Abigail. Rather than Abby. So it's taking a little bit longer to log in as Abigail, but once we get into the system, as you can see, it pulls up the Employee Center, and now we're in as Abigail Kahn. So Abigail needs to enter an expense report for this project. So she can come over here to the expense report page and start the expense reporting process. So she can date that expense report. This expense report is, for project-related expenses. You can indicate if you got an advance on that expense report, and we just go through the process now of defining the line for that expense report. So let's say she had to rent a car. So we actually can, Abigail is an international domestic and international employee, so we actually have to define a currency for her. The amount here for the car rental, let's say it's $237, and it was through a car rental company. So we can indicate whether that's reimbursable or non-reimbursable, and then we can attach receipts to that particular line item. So we can jump right out. I'm just going to go get one that I saved out here. So grab a receipt example. That's a PDF. We can add it to the expense report line and finish if we have additional lines to enter, but as of right now we'll leave just this one, and then we can submit that. So this out-of-the-box workflow from an expense report is it can move to a supervisor approval status, and then also an accounting approval status. So we can kind of leverage two sort of out-of-the-box layers of approval functionality from an expense reporting perspective. If you need to get a little more creative with how expense reports and timesheets need to be routed, then There's other ways to do that, a little bit easier to do from an expense reporting perspective or from an AP invoice perspective. But NetSuite also has SuiteFlow, which is its own custom workflow engine that we can leverage some transactions to be able to run through a custom workflow that you've defined that works best for your business. So Abigail's expense report is pending accounting approval, so we can jump out, and I'm going to go ahead and jump back in as Mark, the project manager, so we can approve that expense report. So Mark happens to be an administrator, so Mark can also approve the expense report that is actually awaiting accounting approval. So if I get out here and we take a look at that, see if we can find, oops, go to the list, see if we can find an expense report from Abigail. So there's that expense report from Abigail, so we'll view that. And you can see here the status is pending accounting approval, so we go ahead and we can go ahead and approve that. And with that approval process, that $237 now is posted as a cost against the project. So if we jump back into project 1180 that we've been working with, we'll see that that's been updated there. Okay. Related transactions under costs, and now we can see that our expense report 88 for $237 has been posted. Okay, so that gives you a good feel for kind of entering timesheets and entering expense reports. Same thing with other transactions, like if, for example, a vendor bill. So if you were to go in and process an AP vendor bill for this particular project, you can see here that we can enter that AP vendor bill number, the document number, select a particular vendor, and then I can come down here and categorize, so it gets accounted for properly, categorize that expense, select a project, put in the amount, and you can also indicate whether or not it's billable. So I won't go through entering that here, but ultimately what that does is it generates a supplier-related expense against, or another cost-related expense against your project. So there's one example of a vendor bill here. Here's another example of a vendor bill. We can just drill back into it, where that vendor bill was entered against the project. That project was selected. It was for $1,350 for consulting services that were provided. So that expense is billable to the client. So we've indicated that, and we've actually set up a charge rule to capture that. So as a good segue, let's talk a little bit about invoicing the project. So invoicing the project from a the way this particular project is set up, it allows us to do a few different things. I mean, you can do milestone billing, we can do time material billing within NetSuite. There's a lot of different methods and ways that invoicing can be achieved. In this particular case, we've set up these rules that generate charge records based on a given condition, right? So we have, if I drill into the rules, I have two rules here. I have an installation complete rule, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, and then I've got a contract signature. They're kind of listed a bit out of order here. But the contract signature would come first, and then the installation complete would come second. And then I've got an expense-based rule as well that essentially says, hey, if I pass any of these transaction types, maybe it's an expense report, or it's a vendor bill, or it's a check, through the solution, and they're of this particular status, then capture that and generate a charge record for it. So again, that's the rules that you're building to be able to recognize a certain condition within the solution. So NetSuite then runs its charge engine each night, or I think you can set it to be more frequently if you like, but it's going to run by default at least once a day, and it'll generate these charge records, right? So you can also come in here to the charge run history, and I can automatically generate that as well if you wanted to do that. So then it would come over here, and if there are charges, additional charges to be captured, then it'll capture those charges like it just did for the expense. Whoops, I lost it. For the expense report and for the vendor bill we just put in. If I'm Mark, if I'm the project manager, I may be jumping over here and saying, okay, well, I need to make sure that I know that I've got a milestone coming up, so I might jump into the project dashboard and take a look at my milestones. So down here on my Gantt chart that's being presented by NetSuite, I can see that we've done pretty well with the first 3 tasks, and we're at a contract signature milestone, and it's about time to build that milestone. So coming into that milestone up here through this particular portal, I can see I've got the contract signature milestone due, so I can actually come in and edit that transaction and set the status for that contract signature task or milestone to be complete. So when you do that, obviously we've set up a rule that we just reviewed to be able to capture that information. So the engine will run in the background, and it'll actually generate now that invoice, that $10,000 invoice for contract signature milestone completion. So let's think about that, and we can jump back into the project here in just a second. All right, so if we refresh this project task, now that milestone goes away, and then we just have the installation milestone that we need to bill for in another 11 days. So coming back to project 1180 and back into the related transactions, sorry, I'm going to go into the financial, and looks like it did generate the charge for the $10,000. So the system went ahead and ran that, and now it's prepared an invoice to be reviewed for that $10,000. We can come in here and we can look at all the pending charges in the detail and review that, make sure that it all looks good. We can mark them as non-billable. We can zero out those charges. You get a little bit of control in terms of how you want to pass that through before you generate an invoice. But if we're ready to invoice that, we very easily come into transactions, clients, and then invoice billable clients. And we can select you can set some parameters up here for which transactions you want to see that are billable. And then you can come in here and actually run the billing. So we do have a invoice that we want to generate for $16,352 for that project. So I can submit that, and then NetSuite will automatically generate that that invoice and let us know if there are any issues with generating it. From there, it can be scheduled to be sent to the client. All right, so let's go ahead. I think we got a pretty good feel for the process there, from kind of capturing expenses all the way to the billing process. So let's go ahead and jump back into the presentation and just talk a little bit about business intelligence. So what's available from a business intelligence reporting and analytics perspective? Well, there are quite a few reports that are out of the box from a project perspective. So you get things like utilization reports, project budget versus actual from a cost and billing perspective. We can see at a glance project profitability, and then there's also some reports relative to being able to forecast revenue within your specific projects. On-demand real-time analytics, like we looked at a little bit earlier, we looked at the one on the top right. It was the project manager's view, or similar to it, of their project dashboard. But there are various other ways dashboards and reports can be set up to be able to present information to the appropriate roles. So flexibility, we talked about this a little bit earlier. How is NetSuite really giving you as a business a competitive advantage? Well, it is a single unified solution under a single cloud source from a code-based perspective. So that allows for rapid delivery of the functionality. You can get it up and running quickly. Obviously, you've got things to do like configuring a chart of accounts, importing vendors and customers, and a little bit of history. But for the most part, in terms of what you're looking to do, the solution can be up and running very quickly. It's flexible relative to changing business models. So as your business changes, there's enough allowance there for you to be able to change the way NetSuite behaves from a project management and billing perspective to meet those new business model needs. And then customization, I know it's kind of a dirty word, but it's not too bad of a dirty word when it comes to NetSuite, because customization is not too difficult to do from a NetSuite perspective. There's some very good tools embedded within the solution that help us minimize customization if need be, but simplify is probably a better word there in terms of the customization that needs to be done. Obviously, we can get into complex customization and different behaviors from a customization perspective. But you know, kind of the top level customization functionality is pretty easy to handle within NetSuite. And then it's secure and reliable. I mean, we've got a lot of certifications relative to NetSuite security, redundancy, reliability, and downtime. You know, NetSuite has been very reliable for as long as we've been working with it in terms of system uptime. So finally, there were a couple things that I wanted to show relative to the NetSuite BI side of things. So let's jump back into the solution very quickly, and we're going to go back to Mark's homepage. So one of the great things about the navigation portlet is I can set up some reports that I know that I'm going to access on a regular basis. So we talked about a budget to actual report. So I only have the budget to actual report listed here for that specific project that we were working on. There's a couple of them, but we can see things like this. In this case, this is a project cost, budget versus actual report. So I have budgeted costs versus actual costs and where I stand in terms of those different cost buckets. If we look at project profitability, so I can kind of see from a at a glance and you know, and a cost category perspective where I'm at relative to revenue and costs and profitability. So estimated cost margin percentage over there to the far right, you know, how I'm doing in terms of project performance. These reports within NetSuite can be exported out to CSV files, PDF, text files, can also be emailed and scheduled as well, so we can get this information on an automated basis. The final report I just want to throw up there is the project charges forecast report. So we've got several different projects listed here. Across the top is the time element or the time dimension, and we can see when we would expect to be billing based on certain project setup for that particular project. So the project we were just working with, the E85 installation, shows that we're going to be billing the full 30K in the month of September. So lots of good feature functionality there relative to Project BI and reporting. And we've already looked at the dashboard, so you got a feel for that one already. All right, so finally, let's wrap up with talking about some benefits of NetSuite. So it's an integrated end-to-end solution that really includes all the financials and PSA functionality that your business would need. It's a cloud-based solution under a unified platform. It's secure and flexible. Real-time visibility to forecasts, resource capacity management, KPIs and reports, and also the health of the project as well. The mobility factor is great in terms of just apps available from an iOS or Android perspective, from a tablet perspective. And because we have these solutions integrated and we are these functions of project management integrated, this gives us more time to be able to commit ourselves to developing business and gaining new customers on the customer list. So just another mobility slide there relative to all the different things and different areas, different ways that we can interact with NetSuite relative to access anytime and anywhere. So the takeaways here for this session: ease of data access and mobility, anytime, anywhere, any device. Real-time project update, as you saw when we were actually processing transactions, we saw those update the project immediately. Eliminates manual entry, so I'm not having to go into my resource capacity planning spreadsheet and then come back into my ERP system, then head back out to my revenue recognition schedule and make an update and then reflect that with journal entries back into my ERP system. I'm having that all under one unified platform and solution. And then the KPI and scorecard aspect of it, the BI aspect of it, and analytics, all maintained and wrapped up within NetSuite as well. Scalability and flexibility is big. So as the business grows, as the model develops, as it evolves, NetSuite is capable of evolving with you. All right, so let's see if we have any other questions that have come up. I'm taking a look here now. We've got a couple of them. Is there an out-of-the-box workflow for routing timesheets and expense reports in NetSuite? So yeah, I mentioned a little bit earlier that We've got out-of-the-box, simple, kind of standard workflow for different transactions within NetSuite, and then SuiteFlow is the custom engine for NetSuite, custom workflow engine for NetSuite. Can NetSuite integrate with Concur expense reports? Actually, it can. There is a connector that's available that integrates both the NetSuite application and the Concur expense report application. Concur is obviously one of those best-in-class expense reporting business apps that are out there. So NetSuite has already configured well, NetSuite and Concur have already configured a connector for that. How does the licensing model work for the centers that were mentioned? So the licensing model, I guess I'll address that from a pricing perspective. I don't have the exact pricing, but I believe the customer and the vendor pricing are, those don't cost anything for your vendor to be able, or your supplier to be able to access the vendor center, or for your customer to be able to access their customer center. Limited functionality there. That's why the price is favorable to the customer, to the supplier, but there aren't any fees associated with that. Now the employee center is a bit different. It's less than the full access user, of course, but the employee center user is the one that would allow you to get in and, like we saw, process a requisition, an expense report, or a timesheet. We have one more here. Does NetSuite track payroll-related balances for its resources, PTO balance, leave time, etc.? It does, but from what I showed you today, that functionality is not loaded. You actually have to leverage the payroll aspect of NetSuite to be able to track PTO balances and leave time and that type of thing. So, okay, I think that's about all we have for today. Again, I really appreciate everybody attending this session. We've got NVerge Spring 2017 coming up in kind of the May timeframe of next year. So if you enjoyed today's sessions, we're going to be doing it live. So we look forward to that, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you there. Thanks, everybody.